Need a search engine optimization SEO services? Then get in touch with our professional and friendly team to learn more about our range of custom and tailored services designed to suit your exact needs. Every one of our professionals have acquired years of experience, which ensures you get the very best. Our experienced staff is waiting to hear from you and to answer any specific questions that you may have on how we can meet your needs. Just ask for a consultation and let us prove our commitment to you as we promise to maintain the highest level of quality and commitment. Your satisfaction is our prime concern. So please, don't hesitate to get in contact with us and let us show you all the great options we have.
And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at coalition_radio, and of course the mothership now at coalitionradionetwork.com with our older shows and our older material at coalitionradio.us. We ask always if you could take a moment and like us, Facebook us, share us, tweet us, particularly on YouTube. Social media is and always will be the primary method to which we can disseminate information and bring our news to the community. There are a lot of media outlets out there. A lot of them have a lot more money than we do. But I would argue that there are few that will deal with what I call the cutting edge, bleeding edge, no safe word type of issues that we do here on the Coalition. Got a very special announcement tonight as we begin to expand from a single show that's been on the air, some variety of airwave, digitally, analog, for going on 8 years, to actually a family of shows, a network, if you will, hence the coalitionradionetwork.com. In the last segment, we reintroduced the Golf News RI folks as going to be a regular show here on Thursday evenings from 7:30 till about 8:15. I am very proud to announce that our next guest, who you know well, will be joining us on a regular basis from Tuesday evenings at 7:30 for a half-hour show to present literally what we're giving the doctor is a blank slate, to present issues concerning health, politics, what's important to communities in here in Rhode Island. It's our way of actually fulfilling of what we call the Coalition, because the Coalition was never meant to be a single show espousing a single school of thought. The point is to take a number of perspectives, a variety of ideas, find common ground, and, if you will, come up with solutions to attack what ails Rhode Island from a health perspective, as we're dealing with right now, from the body politic, community issues, our judicial system, law enforcement, taxation, economic development. All of those are now intertwined as if never before. There is simply no way to untangle, if you will, this knot that we've created here in Rhode Island of economic, social, justice, and now health issues. So it is with great pride that I reintroduce my friend, someone I'm proud to call a friend, who I met during his gubernatorial campaign just about 2 or so short years ago, Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz. For the first time, welcome to the family, Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz. How are you tonight?
Well, thanks so much for having me, Pat, and for the opportunity to revisit the Coalition Radio on a weekly basis.
It's what are some of the issues, and we're going to get very specific very quickly, but what are some of the general broad themes that you'd like to focus on every week? It's obviously going to do, at least for the near future, extensively with the medical issues surrounding the COVID-19 phenomenon, for lack of a better term than I'll call it. But, is there a perspective that you're looking to share, or where do you want to go with the show?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that there are layers to this crisis. It's a health crisis that has, in fact, led to an economic crisis. So we can't ignore the economic piece of it. I don't think there's going to be any point in this crisis until, we reach a vaccine or really good antiviral therapy where I will stop talking about the healthcare issues. We also have infrastructural issues that we need to address. But as you mentioned, intertwined in that is this kind of push or layer where businesses are starting to open up, and now businesses are having to operate uh, as small kind of healthcare clinics, right? I mean, they're going to be testing their employees, they're going to be collecting healthcare information, storing that information, managing it, and sharing it with the Department of Health. And so there's an economic burden that comes with those requirements on small businesses, and it's really through that. I would say it's through that path, right, of how healthcare, how this crisis, how we're responding to it is adding an additional economic burden on small businesses that we can start to talk about economics in more in depth. And so I think it's going to be an evolution. I think we should start with the core issues and the needs that communities have today, but inevitably, people do need to go to work. They need income. They need to feed their families, and to have job security and pipelines to opportunity. And as you know, Pat, those are things that I mentioned when I ran for governor. And the inequities in income, the inequities in opportunities, right, that have existed for some time now have just worsened this crisis. So we will retouch on those things, but of course, we have to do it through the lens of public health today.
You tweeted today, and by the way, tell folks where folks can find you on social media. That's important because, the key to the show, by the way, is to not just weave you into the coalition family per se, it's to amplify your individual perspective. When we have host shows on this network, it's all about promoting the individual shows. Where can folks find you on social media? Particularly, you have a very, very active, a very substantive Twitter following, and when you do tweet, it's there's an astonishing amount of detail to these tweets.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I mean, there's only so much you can say in 132 characters, but I do try to focus on having substance in there. You can find me on Twitter at Luis Daniel, so LuisDaniel, Munoz, Muno, but instead of an O, a zero, Z. So Luis Daniel Munoz, but replace the O with a zero, and that's the only way I could secure my name or something close to it on Twitter. But of recent days, of course, I have been calling out this administration on the lack of responsiveness, the slow responsiveness. If we're going to be kind of pointed about my criticism, also I've alluded to some concerns around the Secretary of State. That while we are hearing a lot about mail-in ballots, we're not hearing much in the way of how candidates that are challenging incumbent candidates will be able to collect their nomination signatures, given that we have social distancing as a real measure that we're taking as a society. So already, Pat, you see, public health is the primary concern, but even, as a secondary layer to that, we need democracy to continue and to flourish. And so I try my best on Twitter to really call to action our leaders. In terms of Facebook, you can find me at Real, REAL. It's late at night, sorry. Dot Luis Daniel Munoz. So REAL dot Luis Daniel Munoz, and you would find me on Twitter. And from my from my Facebook page, you can then essentially navigate towards a profile page that was created during a time in which I ran for governor. And I do try to, again, post the same content on all of the social media sites. However, I would say each has a slightly different perspective. And so, for instance, we can talk today about what that means in the case of testing, our testing capacity, what we've done with testing, and what we need to do with testing.
Excellent. So, talk to me about this situation with CVS. You raised this today. Give folks a complete picture, if you will.
Yeah, so as you know, the governor has touted that Rhode Island has, been first. I mean, that seems to be a pretty common catchphrase with the governor. We were first in getting, enough tests that per capita we were ahead of any other state. We are first to open the economy, and so that's the kind of political narrative that's been created. But in our rush to be first, we developed this partnership with CVS. And we have to kind of lift the curtain to better understand what that partnership involved. And so CVS actually developed a partnership with Abbott. And Abbott is the one that created the COVID-19 rapid diagnostic test. And so that rapid test created by Abbott was not studied extensively. It was not a standard test. It was kind of pushed through the FDA because of the need for testing, right, in a very short time period. So we didn't really understand the error rate. And so making a decision to rely heavily on CVS and the Abbott test that CVS uses may have given us the numbers to appear as though we were doing very well, and that overall, because we're testing quote unquote 7% of Rhode Island's population, that we should be able to open the economy. That, again, the numbers added up for the political narrative that the governor was pushing forth. But what we actually learned just over this past week from New York University is that test, the Abbott test, actually has a higher error rate compared to the standard nasopharyngeal test. That's where they put the nasal swab far up into your nose, right? So that's the standard one. And you may have seen some videos, or if not, anyone can go online and find them. Now that the standard test, the nasopharyngeal test that goes deep up into your nose, that has an error rate of 30%. So what does that mean? It's a false negative rate. So that means that 30% of the time, 30% of the time, the test may tell an individual that they are negative when they in fact are positive. And so that individual may go home feeling like everything is fine, and yet they have COVID-19, and as you might imagine, they can then spread it to those that are in contact with them for a period of 15 minutes or longer. And so that's the nasopharyngeal test error rate. The Abbott test was found to have 48% false negative rate. That's 18% more. I mean, essentially, it's almost 50%, right? And that's a huge error rate. I mean, so big that it makes you wonder whether we should even be using the test, whether there's any real benefit if 50% or close to 50% of the time you're going to be told that you do not have COVID-19 when in fact you do. So we pushed forth. We said, let's focus on this partnership with CVS. But here's the bigger issue, Pat, and my biggest concern: communities, urban core communities of color, not the political leaders within those communities. The communities themselves were asking for additional testing sites. They were saying that there were transportation issues, that there were no testing sites that were in walking distance. They were telling media outlets, they were trying to speak to their elected officials, saying they cannot get into a test because they don't have a physician, and there's a physician referral requirement. They don't know how to navigate the healthcare system to know that they should go to an urgent care center. They don't have the $181 for a COVID test that urgent care centers are charging, right? All of these things were being said. And so the governor's response and the administration's response, instead of meeting the needs of the community at that point, decided to lean on the CVS partnership and say, well, CVS, it will take care of those communities. CVS will take care of those communities. But where are we now? Now we're at a point where we're seeing Central Falls as a hotspot. We're seeing Providence as a hotspot. We're seeing Pawtucket as a hotspot. Urban core communities and communities of color now with higher numbers than any other community. And those communities were relying heavily, again, on the CVS partnership because they didn't have additional testing sites. And let me be clear, even when 2 sites were added in Providence, there were reports that one of those new testing sites only had 10 test kits a day, Pat, 10. So again, here we are. wondering how the numbers increased, how transmission rates got out of control in these cities. But all we have to really do is connect the dot back to the fact that we were relying, that those communities were dependent on a test that was lower quality than the test they should have been afforded by having testing sites that had testing kits and that were in walking distance and accessible, open, no requirements for physician referral. So that's where we are, Pat. That's where the story and the partnership of, of Rhode Island's partnership with CVS really kind of blew up in our face, I think.
So this drumbeat, if you will, of unrelenting woe that I seem to spew every time we get together cannot change, because we still have yet to reach any level of synergy with any significant portion of the population within a finite time. Now, I'm going to ask you, is my continuing insistence on the importance of having that critical mass of tested population within that finite period of time? You can tell me, am I off base on that? That's been my sort of litmus test to the response for this, because in my, and again, I've taken the same epidemiology Facebook course that everyone else has, so I must be an expert, right? But just on a simple level of common sense, based on the vicious level of transmission that can occur with this disease, particularly in the close confines of the urban core, is it in fact, am I incorrect to base so much of everything that I'm looking for on the ability or inability of us to reach that critical mass in a large form of testing within a finite period of time? I'm a little circular logic there, I apologize, but tell me, give me an intervention here if I'm way off.
So your question is, is it feasible? Is that your question?
Well, I guess my question is anything we're doing really valid, given from my layman's perspective, our inability to get a significant critical mass of people tested in that close period of time? Do we have any real legitimate fact set to deal with?
Look, here's my concern. We're talking about swabs. We're talking about chemical reagents, right? It is feasible. It is feasible as a state and as a country to have 3 tests per person. At this stage of the crisis, it is also feasible to have additional testing sites that have more than 10 kits, right? Test kits per day. And so the feasibility is there. So my challenge is not so much like, why aren't we doing it, in terms of feasibility of access to resources, of the operational capacity that's already built in to the few community health centers that are in these communities. It's more about what would the numbers tell, and how would those numbers impact the political agenda of an administration that clearly does not care about how many people get sick in the urban core in Rhode Island.
So, despite the, at least, odes given by the governor to how much he cares, you remain unconvinced that this current administration gives a damn about the urban core? Are those two, am I putting words in your mouth, or is that too strong?
I think history shows that when schools were falling apart, this administration, the one that is currently in office, did nothing. That when communities, citizens and immigrant communities in the state of Rhode Island were asking for help and resources, this administration has always been slow to respond. That when in 2018, there was a lot of discussion, regardless of whether it was an election year, about community health infrastructure, this administration did not even acknowledge the need for community health infrastructure. When this administration ran a deficit, where did they take $5 million from? It was Rhode Island Hospital. where did they deny funds to, or who did they deny funds to? It was the nursing homes. So history has shown that vulnerable communities, communities of color, urban core communities are not top priority for this administration. And now we're confronted with a disease that, even if in the scheme of a percentage, it may seem low, that the mortality rate may seem low, when you spread that across Rhode Island's population, when you spread it across the country, it is significant. A significant number of people are getting sick, and a significant number of people have died, and a significant number of people can die. So, Pat, there's no evidence, even in this response or in any responses prior to this crisis, that this administration is going to go above and beyond to create the necessary programmatic change and infrastructure improvements to protect Rhode Islanders' most vulnerable communities, Rhode Island's most vulnerable communities. There's just no evidence to show that that's going to take place.
You raise a very important point. You raise multiple important points, but one in particular strikes out at me. Folks who listen to the show for any period of time know that I live in Cumberland. We are blessed. North Cumberland has not exactly been a hot spot by any level. You know, the nature of the community, the zoning, all of that keeps people largely at bay. Their schools are not overcrowded. Their infrastructure is not crumbling. And while there are parts of the community that can be described as, you know, middle class and working, even working poor, there is certainly no level of poverty. And I'm very careful when I say that. There's no widespread poverty across the town. So as a result, for a number of reasons, geographic, socioeconomic, why is that important to the argument? Well, if you're going to extrapolate the death rate in the state of Rhode Island across communities like Cumberland, by definition, it's going to be artificially low with respect to the type of conditions necessary for this disease to run rampant. And one, again, you'd only look from New York north to look at the communities that have been hardest hit and the populations that have been hardest hit to understand that this is a disease that truly discriminates on economic boundaries. It is. This is a disease that targets right at the heart of the working poor. I believe that to be indisputable. So if in fact you're going to, play up your numbers statewide and not really kind of, and for lack of a better term, give us the death map that the state really needs to see, I believe that to be a form of governmental fraud. That's one man's opinion. What do you think?
Well, here's the thing, Pat. I mean, we talk about, the economic inequities, the lack of affordable housing, right? The healthcare disparities, the educational disparities, just an entire, a crumbling foundation, right? That our communities are standing on, are living on. And then you bring a crisis like this into the picture, and really, it's hard not to speak about health care access in terms of health justice. It's hard not to just make this political, because at this point, it truly is about liberation, about bringing a community, to a point where they have the liberty to live, right? Where they have the resources that are going to allow them to survive, to thrive. Because right now, those resources aren't present. They weren't before the crisis. But given that now there's a rationing of resources, given that now the state government has decided to ultimately kind of choose what communities should be locked down versus what communities shouldn't be locked down, what businesses should open versus what businesses shouldn't open, not through the lens of a public health official, but through the lens of commerce. It's hard not to speak in terms of health justice, of liberation, because right now this is just another measure that is suppressing and these communities, our communities, and placing them at further risk.
And we started this conversation in a sense probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago, which in the perspective of a public health conversation, in the perspective of a normal, if you will, if there is anything such as normal anymore, but back, let's just say 6 months ago, if one were to say one was having a conversation and it spanned 5 or 6 weeks, 2 months, and you were looking for serious institutional change during that time, you would say, well, that's not nearly enough. But time really means nothing anymore, because on a daily basis, Rhode Islanders and Americans and people across the world are dying. And so the normal framework for a conversation like this pre-COVID is irrelevant. Everything, for lack of a better term, is on steroids now, isn't it? We are, despite, I will say, what's the term I'm looking for? We've reached a point in this conversation, not our conversation, but nationally, to many people who become almost numb to it, because it's become part of the day-to-day reality. Yet, if one was in a hospital, you would hear the word term stat, and that's a symbol of the need to react in a critical time frame. So, as Americans, and what I call American politics, I always call it, Luis, I always call it short-term attention span theater. The normal short-term attention span theater has turned, and many people are looking, towards life in the next stage, as our governor has defined it. When in reality, have we fixed anything yet? At any level?
And right, I mean, we have not done anything yet. We have not. I mean, we're not even considering, again, we're not even considering the businesses and how they can protect their employees and customers, right? The state is completely displacing liability on businesses. So even if someone in the audience is of the mindset, which we're seeing it, Pat, right, that liberty, freedom, and open economy is what America should stand for. If that's a perspective that someone that's listening has, then still consider the fact that these businesses that want economic opportunity, they want to build wealth, right, for their families. This setup or this opening of the economy is setting them up to fail. It's not for success. The only companies that are going to succeed are the ones that are privileged enough to have access to special interests, right? To have that relationship with the politician that's allocating resources. Those are really the businesses in this crisis that are going to succeed. Initially, Commerce Rhode Island had even gone so far to say that they would run a pilot, until they realized that it would be too evident. If it were a pilot, it would be too clear to the public that the companies that would succeed would have been selected by the administration. So it's no longer a pilot. But still, I have a friend who owns a hair salon, and I mean very successful. And while the administration is saying that they've been speaking with hairstylists and business owners in that particular industry segment, this is an individual that's on associations. He's on the very boards and committees that are influencing that industry and those companies in Rhode Island, and he hasn't heard from the administration. Those committees haven't heard from the administration. So again, Pat, I mean, even if you're looking at this through an economic lens purely, businesses are being set up to fail. And with that said, for anyone that's on that side, and I hate to even say their sides, because I do think that there's an intersection of both. But if you are completely of the belief that we should not be taking public health measures, then I would say that you're adding liability to your business, because this disease is new. We're just now finding even reports of children being impacted by it after they were asymptomatic carriers. Mm-hmm. That's called a multi-system inflammatory syndrome, right? Reports are coming out of New York. We know that viruses mutate. So anyone that points out the flu, put it in perspective. The flu has different strands. Some strands have been more dangerous than others. It's a constant race to fight against the flu, but at least we have a framework and foundation of vaccines that helps us understand how to build the next generation of vaccines. We don't have that for COVID-19. We don't know how it's going to evolve. We don't even know how this strand or the strands that we're confronted with now are impacting us yet. And the long-term impacts, not only the short-term, we don't know if those individuals that almost went into respiratory failure are going to have scar tissue and then respiratory conditions in the future that are going to lead to further healthcare cost burdens on their families, right? I mean, just the impact is just something we don't really understand and can't foresee. So whatever side of the aisle, if you even choose a side at this point, you want to be on, whether it's economics or public health, the reality is we're not ready. We're not ready on either front.
Let me before we sign off tonight, let me present you with one analogy, and I don't know that it's a fair one or a good one or a particularly medically appropriate one, but it's one that I lived through, that people I know died of, and that took over the planet, and that of course is HIV. In reflecting back on HIV, I'm not sure if you're aware of the exact, but give me a ballpark. How many years did it take us to develop the quote unquote cocktail, where a variety of medicines were combined to eventually put it in, to not cure it, to not act as a vaccine, but to simply place it into some level of remission? How many years did that take? Are you aware?
Not off the top of my mind, but I think, definitely over 10 years before we got into cocktails. I mean, we trialed certain single treatments, but it took some time to figure out the cocktail.
Right, and that's...
which essentially, for the listener, is a combination of therapeutics, all that address a different aspect of the virus, whether it's replication rate or whether it's other aspects of it. But anyway, I don't want to go too far into this one.
Right, but we, and that was after marshaling resources literally worldwide. We still don't have a cure per se, nor do we have a vaccine, do we, for HIV?
None reported, right, Pat? So,
yeah.
So look, we were able to control. We're able to get viral loads for some HIV patients down to like almost undetectable. So we have progressed in that field. I mean, this is not a discussion where we're focusing on that, but the reason I bring that
up in closing was that, not to bring up the politics of HIV care or the AIDS epidemic, but the stunning amount of time it took us to bring that into some level of control. So what I find the height of arrogance is the notion that a government body, a government organization that clearly is not even capable of providing first-level testing consistently, and again, reaching that critical mass where we have some understanding of, at a static point, what type of exposure the population has had to it. But the notion that somehow we're in any position to predict a cure or to predict even something like a cocktail, when in fact the last truly global epidemic took place over a generation. That's the only point I wanted to make. So I was just, in closing, I throw that out to you just as a basis maybe for conversation in the future. But based on past circumstances, it just strikes me that the government's being awfully damn cavalier about the true impact on this on the community at large. Just wondering what your thoughts were.
And that, yeah, absolutely. And that's the issue. I mean, for the naysayers, I would just recommend that they read more on the science, understand that this is a threat that we're going to face for some time. And even when we have the vaccine, the level of risk may change, but COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19, it's with us. And it may be with us for a long time. And so that's a reality. And for anyone saying, open up already, my perspective is not that the economy should not go on. We understand that, again, when we're talking mental health, when we're talking economic inequities, when we're talking poverty, those things are not good. So we do need to move forward, but we need to move forward with wisdom. We need to have the necessary infrastructure to protect our communities, to even protect the businesses that we envision should thrive in this company, in this country, right? And as a company. And so for anyone that's out there saying open up already, I would just I would throw it back to you and say, well, how do we do that? How do we do that in a way that protects the businesses and the customers? I know that a PowerPoint slide and a box of gloves and hand sanitizer is not enough, but apparently the governor in Commerce, Rhode Island thinks it is.
Wow. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. And I look forward to your weekly participation, if you will, on the Coalition Radio Network. I believe we're starting next Tuesday at 7:30.
Looking forward to it, Pat. Thank you so much.
And no, I look forward to it. And let's continue the conversation. One more time, where can folks find you on social media?
Yeah, well, you can find me on Twitter, again, at Louis Daniel Munoz. Replace the O with the 0, and that's the name I was able to secure. Or in Facebook at real.Louis Daniel Munoz, spelled out normally. And you would be able to access me, and then you could from there navigate to the other Facebook page that I have. So again, I post on a daily basis. I share content regarding the science. I try to make it, I would say, really summarize it in terms of where we are today, what we've learned today. But also, I do point out, some of the political aspects and facets of this crisis, with hopes that the community will really rise up in calling our leaders to further action, again, to both protect our residents here in the state of Rhode Island, but also to ensure that if we are in fact reopening, that we position our economy for success, which really means infrastructure and true support, not for big companies, but for our micro companies, our micro entities, our restaurants, right? All of the businesses out there that the hardworking families of Rhode Island fight every day and have fought every day to keep alive, and will certainly have to fight more to rebuild.
Excellent. Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz joining the coalition. We'll come up with a name for his show yet. He'll come to us with that at some point. But starting next Tuesday night, and we look forward to his weekly participation. And as important, it's important to note that when individual spikes in this crisis continue to occur, he'll join us. We'll flash the symbol across the sky, Batman-like, and we know that somehow he'll reach down and speak with us. Thanks again for joining us. It's always great to have you, and I can't tell you how proud I am to have you as part of the show, both as a friend, a compatriot, a fellow warrior activist, but also someone who is held in high esteem by a variety of communities, and someone with your professional qualifications. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much, Pat.
Folks, we're going to take a break now. We have scheduled some additional shows this evening, which will replay. We have a pretty much a constant stream of shows going on now. We'll continue to up the content, up the ante. But in the meantime, on Facebook Live throughout the evening and throughout the day, you'll see shows regularly repeat themselves. We've got a big Friday night coming on board. We've got I call him a young man, but he's probably my age, closer to my age. He'll be talking about Cranston politics tomorrow night. Paul Archetto. We'll have an hour with the candidates, with Libertarian candidates. And this weekend, we'll have a couple of national participants in the race for the presidential nomination, as well as more innovative local programming. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network, here at coalitionradionetwork.com. Facebook.com/Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you soon.
Need a search engine optimization SEO services? Then get in touch with our professional and friendly team to learn more about our range of custom and tailored services designed to suit your exact needs. Every one of our professionals have acquired years of experience, which ensures you get the very best. Our experienced staff is waiting to hear from you and to answer any specific questions that you may have on how we can meet your needs. Just ask for a consultation and let us prove our commitment to you as we promise to maintain the highest level of quality and commitment. Your satisfaction is our prime concern. So please, don't hesitate to get in contact with us and let us show you all the great options we have.